Weapons. They're sharp, they're big, they might even be sticky. I searched hard and wide to find ideas, and this is what I came up with. The glue launcher. It fires a few blobs that deal a tick damage to the bugs that touch it. The saw blades orbits the player, sawing all the bugs in its path. Tims. The boot comes down from the heavens and squashes the bugs. Chains. They slap down in a plus formation. Grenade. It's just a grenade. Oddly large fish stick. It spins and flies. Big scissors. It's just a big pair of scissors. Cornflake. Throw out a cornflake like a boomerang. Singular waffle square. It bounces a few times in a direction, like Zig's Q from League of Legends. Peanut launcher. Shoots a peanut that then shoots out peanuts. The bird call. Summon a birdie to attack a few bugs. So now for how I turn these ideas into actual weapons. But I'm gonna need you to wishlist the game before I tell you. Did you do it? Okay. Coding the glue launcher was relatively easy. I coded the spawning of the blobs to grab a random enemy as a target, then for the arced movement, I had a little script from a prototype thing that I made, so I pasted that in, and there it was, throw in blobs. I made a couple animations for the blobs and added those. Look at that. For the saw blades, I made an object with some empty game objects, then made it rotate. And for the code, it has a certain amount of time that the saw blades are active, and a separate deactive timer. And the actual saw blade positions are set to the proper point, which depends on how many blades there are. The Tims. It just selects an enemy, then spawns a certain height above them, then move down to the enemy and back up. This then changed when I added the animation. Look at it. Look at that squash. The chains instantiate 4 separate chains, then they needed animations, which I needed to make 3 of them, one for the side slapping, which looks like this, one for the slap upwards, and one for the slap down. And after that, those chains were looking spicy. For the grenade, it spawns a grenade that moves towards a target position, then it explodes and spawns some shrapnel, which are rotated depending on how many shrapnel pieces there are, then adds an impulse force to each piece, sending it into the cosmos. For the oddly large fish stick, I took a rectangle with a rigid body, and when it spawned, I would add torque to it within a random range. Then the angular drag would slow it down over time, which then when its angular velocity was below a certain number, it would then fly off in its face direction. Later on I drew this nice fish stick and now it was complete. For the big scissor I created an animation and then just rotated the object towards an enemy and gave a little delay before the damage snip happened so that you could try to line up some enemies and get a nice old schmackaroo. It was originally snipping in the opposite direction than it was supposed to, but that was fixed and now you got Big Scissor. The cornflake is a boomerang, so originally I wanted to make it arc as it moved, but in the end decided on something much more simple. So the boomerang would add a pretty big impulse force towards an enemy, then in the opposite direction it would add a constant force. This then gives you a nice shootout, then a pretty big slowdown in reverse of the direction. The singular waffle square was slightly odd, but easy. So what I did for that is the weapon would select an enemy, then it would get the angle from the weapon to the enemy, and after it would define 3 separate target positions from that angle. Then you take the same script from the glue launcher blob and modify it to go towards one position, then to another, then to the last, and then delete itself upon arrival. So now I had a nice bouncy purple square. Then later on I made a waffle square sprite and a little animation for some juice, which were then put into the game, so now it would spawn a little damaging splash sprite at the time it bounces. The peanut launcher would send out a peanut towards a point, then it should send out little nuts to the left and right of it. The idea was simple, but when trying to implement it, it was a bit annoying because I was struggling to figure out how to set the angle of which direction it sends out the little peanuts. Eventually I got it. I then drew the nuts, put them in the script. Look at those peanuts. The bird caller was originally going to go in a direction and attack a few enemies that were close to its path, but I decided to chill out and go for a simpler idea. So now the bird caller grabs an enemy's position, swoops towards that position, then repeats until it has swooped the allowed swoop amount, and then it heads back to the position next to the player. Look at that bird. It's definitely a bird. Don't doubt it. I added a ramp up to the speed because of the animation I was going to draw. Speaking of those animations, I drew a bird. Then I made an animation where the bird whooshes up and then turns into a dive. Then after coding everything, I needed to make the cards that allow you to select the weapon when leveling up. I mean, look at those cards. They're beautiful. I then added all the damages in, and all the weapons were ready to go. This update is live. You can go check it out if you already own the game. And please wishlist the game if you think it looks cool. Goodbye.